The average American 401k just reached a record high, more than $160,000. That sounds like good news, except during the same year, a record number of Americans were pulling money out of those accounts early. They were willing to pay taxes, penalties, and damage their retirement just to get cash today. About 6% of savers raided their retirement accounts, roughly triple the rate before the pandemic. Of those hardship withdrawals, 36% were used to avoid foreclosure or eviction. Another 31% went toward medical expenses, and 13% covered tuition-related costs. So the same account is telling us two completely different stories. One story says Americans are wealthier than ever. The other says millions of them are breaking open their retirement savings to survive the month. How can both stories be true? The contradiction gets bigger when you zoom out. The stock market has already hit its 23rd record high this year. Home prices are higher than ever. Total household net worth in America has never been larger. By the numbers, this is one of the richest periods in the country's history. But consumer sentiment toward the economy has fallen to its lowest recorded level. Lower than the early 1980s recession, lower than the 2008 financial crisis, lower than during the pandemic lockdowns. That leaves two possibilities. Either the economic data is somehow wrong, or millions of Americans have collectively forgotten how wealthy they are. And judging by the number of people financing groceries, the second explanation may need a little work. The simpler answer is that both economies are real. The boom is real. The financial stress is real. They are just landing on different people. Rising asset prices do not lift the country evenly. Wealth created by the stock market does not fall across America like rain. It lands in particular accounts owned by particular households. If you own enough stocks and real estate, record highs can reshape your life. Your retirement account grows, your home equity rises, your net worth climbs while you sleep. If you do not own those assets, the record high is mostly a headline you scroll past before going to work. So the real question is not whether the economy is booming. It is. The question is, who owns the boom? And to answer that, we have to follow the assets. There are roughly 134 million households in the United States. According to Federal Reserve data, the richest 1% of them, around 1.3 million households, own more than half of all the stocks in the country. Expand that to the richest 10%, around 13 million households, and they own roughly 87% of the market. That leaves the bottom 90% of America, about 120 million households, sharing the remaining 13%. And the concentration gets even sharper at the bottom. Teachers, nurses, bus drivers, retail workers, the bottom half of the country, around 67 million households, own about 1% of the stock market. Not 1% each. 1% divided between all 67 million households. The usual response is that stock ownership has become more widespread. And technically, that is true. Around 58% of Americans own some stock, usually inside a retirement account. But owning stock and owning enough stock to benefit meaningfully from a boom are not the same thing. For the bottom half of the country, median stock holdings are around $13,000. For the top 10%, they are around $600,000. That is roughly a 48-fold difference. In 2025, the stock market returned around 16%. For a household with $13,000 invested, that produces a paper gain of just over $2,000. For a household with $600,000 invested, the same market produces roughly $96,000. Same percentage, same year, completely different life impact. And that is only 1 year. Since 2020, the market has climbed by more than 120%. So while access to the market became more democratic, the dollars did not. The households that already owned most of the assets collected most of the gains. That partially explains why the economy looks healthy from above. But it creates another problem. If so many households are falling behind, why is consumer spending still rising? Someone has to be paying for all of this. Where is the money coming from? Start with wages. Average hourly earnings recently rose about 3.6% from a year earlier. That sounds like a raise. But inflation over the same period was around 3.8%. So the average raise was consumed by rising prices before it improved anyone's purchasing power. Before the average worker spent a single additional dollar, they were already slightly behind. Gallup asked Americans to name the biggest financial problem facing their families. The top answer was not unemployment. It was not low wages. It was the cost of living. High prices and inflation were named by 31% of Americans, near the highest level in more than 2 decades of the survey. Prices are now more than 28% higher than they were at the beginning of 2020. And 55% of Americans say their financial position is getting worse. Yet spending continues. So the money has to be coming from somewhere. And increasingly, it is coming from the future. It is coming from debt. Americans are carrying around $1.25 trillion in credit card debt. The average interest rate on those cards is now close to 23%. And this is not mainly wealthy people collecting reward points and airport lounge access. Among people carrying credit card debt, 33% told Bankrate that normal day-to-day expenses were the primary reason. They are not borrowing for a luxury holiday. They are borrowing to keep the lights on, buy food, fill the car, and get to the next paycheck. There is now a name for this: survival debt. And unlike debt used to buy a house or start a business, survival debt does not create anything that can help repay it. The food is eaten. The fuel is burned. The utility bill returns next month. The balance remains. Now, back to survival debt. Mike Croxon, who runs the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, described what his organization is seeing as a shift from discretionary debt to survival debt. And once someone begins using high-interest debt for ordinary expenses, there is often no obvious escape route. According to Bankrate, 61% of people with credit card debt have now carried it for at least a year. That is 8 percentage points higher than in 2024. They are paying interest on yesterday's groceries while buying this week's groceries on the same card. And credit cards are no longer the only option. Buy now, pay later was once mainly used for furniture, electronics, or concert tickets. Now more than 90 million Americans use it. According to LendingTree, more than a quarter of buy now, pay later users have used these loans for groceries. More than half say they could not make ends meet without them. We have reached the point where a normal trip to the supermarket can arrive with its own payment schedule. Debt helps explain how spending can continue when incomes are under pressure, but it also means household finances become more fragile. Normally, savings are supposed to absorb the shock: a broken car, a medical bill, a missed paycheck. Except the savings are disappearing. The personal savings rate has dropped to roughly 2.6%, near the lowest level on record and down from 5.5% a year earlier. And the national average hides an even harsher number. Economists from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Analysis examined savings across the income distribution. For the bottom half of the country, more than 65 million households, the savings rate is negative. Those households are spending more than they receive after taxes. They are not building a smaller safety net. They are running a monthly loss. That is why the 401k contradiction matters. For one group, the retirement account is growing because markets are rising. For another, it has become the final account available to raid. Economists often describe this as a K-shaped economy. The top arm rises, the bottom arm falls. Winners move one way, losers move the other. It is a useful image, but it misses the group in the middle. Because America is not simply dividing into people doing well and people doing badly. There is a third group. Households that still appear stable, but are slowly losing ground. Their income is too high to look poor. Their assets are too small to make them wealthy. Their raises arrive, but prices absorb them. They still have breathing room, just less of it every year. So, if the economy is no longer really shaped like a K, what does it look like? Picture the letter E. 3 horizontal bars. Now stretch the top bar far beyond the others. Leave the bottom bar close to the floor. Then tilt the middle bar downward. That is a better picture of the American economy. The top bar is the richest 10%, The ownership class. Their wealth is held in stocks and real estate. Home prices have risen around 55% since 2020. The stock market has gained more than 120%. Their net worth has surged because they own the things becoming more expensive. The bottom bar is the bottom half of the country. They own roughly 1% of the market. Many have negative savings rates. They are carrying survival debt and sometimes splitting grocery bills into installments. They are not participating meaningfully in asset inflation. They are trying to avoid falling further behind. Then there is the sloping middle bar. The households that still look fine on paper. They have jobs, they have income, they may even have a small retirement account. But their purchasing power is shrinking, and their spending habits are changing. Heather Long, chief economist at Navy Federal Credit Union, observed a pronounced move toward warehouse and discount stores, such as Costco, Walmart, and Aldi, and away from more expensive Whole Food style spending. That is the middle bar tilting downward. Not collapsing. Slipping. The richest 10% of households now hold around 68% of the country's net worth and receive a little over half of all income. The middle 40% hold roughly 29% of net worth and receive about a third of the income. The bottom half hold around 2.5% of net worth and receive roughly 10% of income. That small remainder is divided between about 67 million households. And the distance between the groups is not staying constant. It is growing. That is why the economic headlines and the average person's bank account seem to describe two different countries. Add together all the stocks, homes, retirement accounts, business ownership, and asset gains, and America looks extraordinarily wealthy. But the total does not tell you who owns the total. That is how the stock market can sit at record highs while confidence in the economy sits at record lows. The numbers are not necessarily lying. They are averaging together people who are living in completely different Americas.